Today topic is body cavity. Body cavity is any space, component, or potential piece in an animal body's cavity, organ, and other structure. Cavity is a potential space contain fuel. The two largest human body cavities are the ventral body and cavity as and the dorsal body cavity. Is the dorsal body cavity. The brain and spinal cord are located. The membrane that surround the central nervous system organ, the brain and the spinal cord. In the cranial and spinal cavities are the three meaning are differently lined face contain different types of fluid in the meaning. For example, the fluid is cerebrospinal fluid in the abdominal cavity. The fluid contained in the pharynx is serious fluid. The atmosphere as some interval between the lines their largest body cavity called the coleum. The body cavity is the dorsal body cavity include in cavity internal cavity included by the skull and contains the brain, and the spinal cavity includes by the spine and contains the spinal cord. The spinal cord, the ventral body cavity include are the thoracic cavity includes by the rib cage and contains the lungs and heart, and the abdominal pelvic cavity. The abdominal pelvic cavity can be divided into two. Abdominal cavity includes by the rib cage and pelvis as contain the kidneys, urethra, intestine, liver, and pancreas, and the pelvic cavity includes by the pelvis and contain bladder, anus, reproductive system. The body cavities, the ventral cavities are two main subdivisions: the thoracic cavity and the abdominal pelvic cavity. The thoracic cavity is the more super subdivision of the ventral cavity and is included by rib cage. The thoracic cavity contains by lungs surrounded by the pulmonary cavity and heart surrounded by the pericardial cavity located in the mediastinum. The diaphragm from the floor in the thoracic cavity, the separate in from the more inferior abdominal pelvic cavity. The abdominopelvic cavity is the largest cavity of in the body, occupying the entire lower half of the trunk membrane. Physically divided into abdominal pelvic cavity, it can useful between the abdominal cavity and the pelvic cavity. The abdominal cavity occupies the entire lower half of the trunk to the spinal and house the organ or digestion just under the abdominal cavity. Anterior of the buttocks of the pelvic cavity, the funnel shape and is located interior and anterior to the abdominal cavity and house the organ of reproduction. The dorsal body cavity contains the cranial cavity and spinal cavity. The cranial cavity is a large bean-shaped cavity filling most of the upper skull where the brain is located. The spinal cavity is the very narrow thread-like cavity running from the cranial cavity down the entire length of the spinal cord. In the dorsal cavity, the cranial cavity housed to brain, and the spinal cavity includes the spinal cord. Just as the brain and spinal cord make a continuous unity the structure, the cranial and spinal cavity that house then also contains the brain and spinal cord are protected by the bones of the skull and veritable cerebrospinal fluid, colorless fluid product by the brain, which brain and spinal cord within the dorsal body cavity. Thank you.